couple of weeks ago, Caden did a magnificent job in bringing forth to our minds the need to worship in spirit and in truth. John 4:23 and 24. And some reminders there of how that takes place and why we are to do so. And this morning we'll focus even more on why we should worship. Why worship? This morning we're going to primarily stay at Psalm 24. Kyle and DeLeach, in his commentary on the Old Testament, in their commentary on the Old Testament, say that they believe this to be a psalm written by King David after that the Ark of the Covenant was successfully brought into Jerusalem. You may recall of the record in 2 Samuel chapter 6, how that David sought to bring the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem, to bring it from Gibeah, and so that it might be there in the place where he was reigning, in the city that he is now making the city of the people of Israel and the people of Judah. And he sought to bring it out. He prepared 30,000 men to make this occasion happen. And what did they do? They set the Ark of the Covenant on a new cart. And they began to pull that cart by oxen. And as the oxen went along their way and they stumbled, Uzzah, one of the servants of David, would reach up to steady the Ark of the Covenant. And when he touched it, he died. David was distraught. He was afraid. He had them immediately take it to the house of the Obed-Edom, the Gittite, and he says, let's keep it there for some time. And it was there for 3 months, we're told. In the record of the Chronicles, we would learn that David actually went back to the Scriptures to see what might be the case, why God would strike dead one of his servants who was trying to do something good, had every good intention to make sure that the Ark of the Covenant did not fall to the ground. And you'll find there that they will learn that they were carrying the Ark of the Covenant the wrong way. And it was even perhaps the wrong people that were transporting the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant was built and constructed in such a way that it was to be borne upon the shoulders of a specific group under the Levites. I believe the sons of Kohath, that were to be carrying the Ark of the Covenant with staves that were inserted into those portions that would have been attached to the Ark of the Covenant, so that they did not actually touch the Ark of the Covenant, but it would have been borne on their shoulders. It was there, this Ark of the Covenant was to be in the portion of the tabernacle that was the most holy place. The portion of the tabernacle where only the great high priest, only the high priest, could enter in once per year. No other priests, numerous priests in the tribe of Levi who were serving daily in the ministration of the tabernacle, in the services thereof, and the sacrifices thereof. But only once per year the high priest could enter into this most holy place where the Ark of the Covenant would be, and that would signify that God's presence was there with them. It was there where he would meet with God, and he would bring blood for the Day of Atonement. Blood from bulls and goats, which we later learned could not take away sin. Yes, they could know that they were atoned, but the blood of bulls and goats did not take away their sin. It was in prospect of the blood of Jesus that would come to take away their sin. So after they successfully get the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem and place it into the tabernacle that David had set up there in Jerusalem, then there was great rejoicing. There was great worship. Even it says, where the text tells us that when after the ark was carried 6 paces successfully, that David would then make sacrifices to the Lord, worship God because they were able to transport it successfully. But then once it was there, you have great rejoicing. Perhaps some things that we might even that David did that might be questionable as to why he did them. However, we see that his mindset at this point was entirely upon praising God, worshiping God. And so in Psalm 24, we have that the earth is the Lord's, he says, the fullness thereof, the world and they that dwell therein. For he hath founded it upon the seas and established it upon the floods. Who shall ascend into the hill of the Lord? Or who shall stand in his holy place? He that hath clean hands and a pure heart, who hath not lifted up his soul unto vanity, nor sworn deceitfully. He shall receive the blessing from the Lord, and righteousness from the God of his salvation. This is the generation of them that seek him, that seek thy face, O Jacob. The first thing that I want us to take from this psalm is we are reminded ourselves why we are to worship, and it is the very word that we've just used, and that is we need to worship for the purpose of remembrance. In everything that we do in order to worship our God, there is remembrance. As we enter into prayer together in worship to our God, there is remembrance. Remembrance of the things that are upon our minds, remembrance of the needs that we have, remembrance of the fact that we cannot do this on our own. There's remembrance as we sing and we remind one another of the teachings that we find in these songs. Remembrance of the fact that God is worthy of our song. Remembrance of, as I put that money into the plate, that none of it belongs to me anyway. It all belongs to Him. As we hear a portion of His Word, remembrance not only of precept specific things that we want to be reminded of from the Scriptures, but this Word is from Him. This is from our God who created us. Certainly remembrance of His Son, the body that was hung upon the cross, the blood that He shed for us so that we could be here gathered together in worship even this morning. Remembrance that I am not my own. Remembrance that I'm not alone. Remembrance that this world is not my home. And that God is on the throne. The psalmist would later say in Psalm 90 and verse 2, before the mountains were brought forth, or ever thou hast formed the earth, the world, even from everlasting to everlasting, thou art God. And David, as he would bring the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem, he would write down these words and he would pen these words and he would sing these words, that the earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, the world and they that dwell therein. For he hath founded it upon the seas and established it upon the floods. Reminding us that God is our creator. He is our sustainer. He is the one who is over and above all. That I am not my own, that I am not alone, that this world is not my home, and that God is upon His throne. This past week when we were in Washington, D.C., on Monday, Laura went to her work meeting that morning, and the kids and I, went to the zoo, the National Zoo there in D.C. We wanted to meet with our politicians. We went to the National Zoo on Monday, and then on Tuesday, we went over to the Air and Space Museum for a great amount of time. Spent more time in there than we had intended. And then we wanted to make it over to the Natural History Museum, and we were only able to be in there for a short amount of time. Essentially got kicked out as they were closing down. But we were in there, and we were able to see a lot of these fossils and a lot of the I suppose, artwork that they would use, the casts that they would make to piece together these fossils to make entire creatures. And while in there, I texted my good friends Sean and Stephen and said, this place is both fascinating and infuriating. Because you have all of these fossils and you have these bone structures from these large creatures, and in every single place they are pushing, as if it is the truth, the evolutionary theory. They are pushing that these animals lived millions and millions and millions of years ago, before man. And they're pushing the idea there was even this large rodent type creature. There was some terminology there that this may be one of your oldest ancestors. But it was a great opportunity to teach. And that's something we've talked about a lot throughout the years with the children, and to even discuss the idea that, there is such a thing as micro evolution. That's the idea of you see changes on a small level, and even that small level is vast. As you think about the cat kind or the dog kind, feline and canine, there's a vast number of breeds and species under that kind, but never does the cat become anything other than the cat. Never does the dog become anything other than the dog, which is what macro evolution teaches, which is what Darwinian evolution teaches. This idea that we come from some other creature, and there's much terminology there about reptiles returning to the ocean. This idea that apparently mammal life became reptilian life, and such is simply not the case. There is an abundance of evidence there, and even some of their terminology, that it's having a perspective and view of Scripture, knowing what happened prior to the flood, knowing the small amount of detail that we have about this great worldwide catastrophic flood, that you can see why it is that things are the way that they are. You can see why it is that you have some massive reptilian structures that we don't have today, because they don't live long enough today in order to grow to that size. And yet many of them would have been fossilized instantly with extreme pressure and change in temperature and things at the point of the flood. The psalmist here brings to our mind a remembrance of our Creator, that the Lord owns the earth and the Lord created the earth. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and they that dwell therein. For he hath founded it upon the seas and established it upon the floods. But there's also remembrance as we gather together to worship our God, to remember Him, to remember who we are and why we are here. There's remembrance of our redemption, the very reason that we are able to be here, that we have been bought and redeemed by God, that we have been cleansed by the blood of Christ. In verses 3 and 4, who shall ascend into the hill of the Lord? Or who shall stand in His holy place? He that hath clean hands and a pure heart, who hath not lifted up his soul unto vanity, nor sworn deceitfully. And so David calls to mind the type of person who is able to approach God in worship. We are blessed in the New Testament and in the New Covenant, in the church, to have a much more intimate relationship with God even than they were able to have under the old law, considering that the priest would be their representatives. The priest would take their sacrifices for them, for the people, to bring them before God. And that it was only that once per year occasion that the high priest was able to enter into the most holy place. But yet, week after week, perhaps even there are portions of worship that we can do every day of the week. But week after week, we are able to gather together as God's people and come before our God in His presence through the blood of Jesus, because He has bought us, because He has bought us back, because He has redeemed us. And if we are faithful, no, we're not perfect, but if we are faithful, we can proclaim confidently that we are among those who have clean hands and a pure heart, who do not lift up our souls unto vanity or swear deceitfully. In James 4 and verse 8, James would say, draw nigh to God, and he will draw nigh to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, ye double-minded. We could consider how that we are redeemed by the Lord because of his sacrifice, but at the point that we are washed in his blood. Revelation 1 and verse 5. Acts 22 and verse 16, we read that takes place at the point of baptism. We could consider the washing of regeneration, Titus 3 and verse 5. The washing of water by the word, Ephesians 5 and verse 26. Then in Hebrews 10, going over to Hebrews 10 and verse 22, beginning, the Hebrews writer says, let us draw near with a true heart in full assurance of faith, having our hearts sprinkled from an evil conscience and our bodies washed with pure water. Let us hold fast the profession of our faith without wavering, for he is faithful that promised. And let us consider one another to provoke unto love and to good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as you see the day approaching. Let us draw near, he says, having been cleansed by the blood of Christ. We are a redeemed people, and we come together to worship our God because we have received redemption, and we are reminded of that redemption by the blood of Christ. In Washington, D.C., there is actually a lot of references to biblical things. There's a lot of roots in biblical things. Whether they are properly applied or not is a different story. Interestingly, you could, out in front of the building of the Supreme Court, there are some carvings at the apex of the building that have different individuals that were significant concerning law throughout history. And the one in the center is Moses, interestingly. Entering into the Library of Congress building, we were able to see they have there on display and encased, perhaps one of the things that they want everyone to see because it's out in the middle of one of the floors there, a copy of the Gutenberg Bible. Gutenberg being able to, developing a printing press, the first printing press, being able to print multiple copies in a much more efficient fashion than was before, seemingly was the case. And he would do so from the Latin Vulgate version of the Bible. We were told that Gutenberg printed 180 copies during his time with his press. And interestingly, he developed and invented this press, but he had others who were entered in a partnership with him, and he was not able to pay them back by the time that his time was up, and so they took the press from him. Gutenberg printed 180 copies of the Bible on his press. 40 of those were made with calf skins. And because of the great requirement of that and the cost of that, he eventually would switch to paper. The final 140 would be printed on paper. But those 40 on calf skins, only 4 remain, we are told. And one of those 4 was there in the Library of Congress. And she said that it took 170 calf skins to print that Bible, that copy of the Bible. And so while there is a positive feeling, I suppose, a positive thought that, here is an important building in our nation that has an important book set on display, there's also the reality that those who are around, those who are visiting, and those who are there making decisions for our nation, if they don't ever actually go to the book and consider what it says and try to display their lives by this book, well, then it is merely doing nothing for them. In Jesus' day, the Pharisees were much like that. They prided themselves that they had the documents. They prided themselves that they had the scrolls in the temple, and they could go there and they could read from those scrolls. But if they didn't adhere to the doctrines of those scrolls, well, then they could not be redeemed, and they could not bring others to be redeemed. Why worship? So that we might remember. Remember that we are not our own. Remember that we are not alone. Remember that this world is not our home, and that God is on the throne. Remember our redemption, that we have been bought with a price, that we were bought by the blood of Christ, that we are able to be here because of Him. And the third thing is for revival. Why worship? Because we want to bring a gift to our God. We want to bring sacrifices to the one who has created us. We want to show thanksgiving to the one who has redeemed us. And while here, we will be revived by that very fact, by bringing those sacrifices to Him. At the beginning of our trip, we were able to assemble with the Woodbridge congregation in Woodbridge, Virginia. And the congregation they're just 30 minutes to an hour outside of Washington, D.C. or Arlington, Virginia there. So relatively close to that area. They are without a preacher at the time. We knew that, but we did not know that they were having a gospel meeting while we were there. Interestingly, they began their gospel meeting on Wednesday night and then ended it on Sunday. So Sunday was the last day of meeting. So we traveled all of this way, some 8 to 900 miles, nearly to Washington, D.C., to worship with brethren there who had brought in a preacher from none other than Mississippi. I didn't know this brother until being there. Brother Sean Evans, he's from the central area of Mississippi. He actually preaches in Tylertown. He is a retired veteran and even works for the VA as some type of investigator. I think he investigates on behalf of veterans who are in need of that care. But he began that morning, before he even got to his study, he said, "Brethren, if you look around," and I think he was making mention of the fact, they began on Wednesday, Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, now that's Sunday. He says, "If you look around, you brought me in for a gospel meeting." He said, "But you don't need a gospel meeting. You need a revival." He says, "The least you could do is show up. The least you could do," he said, "is show up." There is so much more. He went on to say, you're looking for a preacher. He says, "Are you going to be ready for the preacher that God sends you? Are you going to be ready? Are you going to expect him to just come in and do all the work? Or are you going to be ready to work with him and work with him for the cause of Christ?" Sometimes we get in that mindset that, well, the preacher works for us. He's going to do all the work, and we're just going to come and assemble and no. We're all to work together. We're all fellow workers together in this. And so on Sundays and other occasions that we have to worship our God, we are fellow worshipers together. As God desires our worship, do we desire to worship Him? And so the psalmist here says, He, the one that ascends into the holy hill of the Lord, the one who stands in His holy place, the one that has clean hands and a pure heart, the one who has not lifted up his soul unto vanity nor sworn deceitfully. He says, he shall receive, verse 5, the blessing from the Lord and righteousness from the God of his salvation. He said, this is the generation of them that seek Him, that seek thy face, O Jacob. Yes, there is revival, there is renewal when we gather together to worship our God. There is a blessing. There are many who have this idea that, I just didn't get anything out of worship. And the question must be asked, well, what did I put in? What did I put in? How much did I participate? What did I do? What sacrifices did I bring? What gifts did I bring to the Lord? In Psalm 85 and verse 6, the psalmist there says, revive us again. And notice there at the last verses of this psalm, David then turns and speaks to the city, it seems. Speaks, perhaps even speaking to heaven. Or he's speaking to the city of Jacob, Judah, Israel, the city of Jerusalem. And he says in verse 7, lift up your heads, O ye gates, and be ye lift up, ye everlasting doors, and the King of glory shall come in. Who is this King of glory? The Lord, Jehovah, strong and mighty, the Jehovah mighty in battle. Lift up your heads, O ye gates, even lift them up, ye everlasting doors, and the King of glory shall come in. Who is this King of glory? The Lord of hosts. He is the King of glory. Yes, David sought to bring the king into the city. While he was king of that city, he wanted to bring the heavenly king. And he wanted to bring in that Ark of the Covenant, which represented the presence, the place that they could meet with God. And he has penned, by inspiration of the Spirit, words which remind us of the importance of worshiping our God. Being reminded that He is our God, that He is in control, that we are not our own. Being reminded of the redemption that we have, that we can have clean hands and pure hearts because of the blood of Christ. Being revived, given a blessing by God because we have brought these gifts to Him. And be reminded that He is the King of glory. This morning, maybe it's the case that you need to come back to the Lord. That you have already put on Christ in baptism, believing who Jesus is, repenting of your former life of sin, and confessing your faith in Him. Maybe you've done those things, but you need to come back to the Lord. You need to be revived by the Lord. You need to be redeemed again in that sense, bought back. The price has already been paid. You've already made the decision, but you have made a decision to leave Him once you come back to Him. Or maybe it's the case that you've never been redeemed. You never obeyed Christ and put on Christ in baptism. You have that opportunity as well. You know, each of these points that we've had this morning had those two prefix letters, R-E, re, meaning again. It's something we've got to do again and again and again so that we can continue to be reminded, so that we can continue to be the redeemed people, so that we can continue to be revived by worshiping our God. This morning, if you need to come to Him or come back to Him, won't you come?